Eric Lamps here from the Shoes in the House podcast. This podcast, I decided to do something that's a bit different. There's a lot going on in the world right now, but right now I want to focus on the strange and awful scenes happening right now in Nigeria and the hashtag ENDSARS movement. When I first stumbled upon this, on social media, and I didn't know what it was about. Once I found out what it was about, I was a bit shocked that the media over here in the westernized world wasn't showing enough coverage over it. So I decided to do some more research and tap into the minds of some people that are a lot more qualified than I and speak about this. So I decided to do a podcast to raise awareness about what's going on. I reached out to 3 special people, which you will shortly hear soon. You will first hear the voice of Wale Davies, followed by the voice of Emmanuel Okorodudu, and then you hear the voice of Damiola Afolabi. Please listen. I hope you enjoy and take care. First of all, thank you very, very much for taking this time out to speak about some of the issues and the sad scenes that's going on in Nigeria. We've seen it all over Twitter with the ENDSARS hashtagging and trending as well. But I've noticed that there's not much going on in the news that we see here. Living in London, shall I say? I know you have great ties to London, but originally you live in Nigeria, but you're here now. What's your perspective on what's going on right now? I want to hear, for those back at home in Nigeria that you're very close with, what the story is over there, shall I say, what the story is like over here from what you've seen, because I know you were protesting as well.
From here. Yeah. Okay, so I think that the main thing is to start with the reason why people are protesting, right? For the longest time, like the Nigerian police, I mean, there's nothing, my main belief is that nothing in Nigeria exists in isolation. So if you have an economy or a country that, you know, that there are huge inequalities and huge gaps, right, it will affect everybody. And, you know, so the first thing I would say is that, like, looking at the Nigerian police, they earn peanuts and they live in terrible conditions. You know, and so as a result, they've been forced to, for the longest time, as far as I've known, they've been forced to figure out ways of other income. And most of that other income is either begging, extorting, or coercing people that they come across, you know. So I say begging because if you're of a certain social standing and you're driving your car, 90% of the time police may stop you and, you know, ask you, depending on where they stop you, ask you to tip them something. You know, they can hail you, hey, chief, big man, like just in the aim of getting something. Or they'll ask you directly, anything for the boys tonight, you know. And so there's a unspoken sort of economy that goes on where, you know, in that first way I've described it, like you would maybe give them something for the night so that they can, you know, buy some food, buy some drink. It sounds crazy to say drink, but yeah, because they're standing on the street the entire night, you know. So you know, so people give them money. Some people tell them next time and drive off. But then there's also the extorting part where, you know, if you are able to be extorted, like they won't extort people with a certain level of car and certain level of status, right? But if they look at you and they profile you, right, in a certain type of way, their aim is then to extort you, right? So they can either, whatever, how did you get this car? Bring your paperwork. Who are you? Look at your tattoos. Look at, a lot of times they ask to open your laptop because there's a big, you know, cyber crime element going on in Nigeria as well. But they've also used that for other, you know, like, why do you have this laptop? Where is your receipt for the laptop? And you're like, bro, I bought this laptop 5 years ago. How am I going to have a receipt just on me, and that, well, you don't have a receipt, you have to come with us to the station, or you have to drop, or with other people that are even less fortunate in other areas that are less public, direct extortion, where they take you to the ATM to withdraw money, or they get you to transfer money to them directly, or if for whatever reason you're made to go to the police station, that the only way out of there is to pay your way out of there. So it's an informal business that goes on. The police. So this is me talking from a privileged position of being an artist, being an entertainer, being from a certain background. Like mine, I've still had to engage with the police, but again, mine has been more. I would say at least 90% of them begging or just wasting your time for you to give them money than extortion. I've only really faced actual extortion if I'm in the wrong area or at the wrong time. So I limit my movement. I know where I go. I know how I move at night. I know how I carry myself, but then there are a lot of people, let's say, that I know that are from similar backgrounds, but maybe they have dreadlocks, and then they see you, oh, you must have weed in your car, we must search your car, you must be a thug, you must be a criminal, you must be, so things, they're still coming from an old school mentality where when they see like dreadlocks or tattoos or all these things, they think you're some sort of criminal. They profiled you into, this in a negative way. But they're not alone in doing that. There's still parents and people who are from our background that would say to their daughter or their son, why are you dating this guy that has dreadlocks? Or even parents that will tell their children, cut your hair so you can be respectable. So the police they're echoing those same sorts of things, but now they have power and they have weapons. So in them echoing that, a lot of young people, especially creative people. So that's why people are saying iPhone and creativity is not a weapon or whatever, is because a lot of artists, a lot of people that, don't conform to this standard are routinely profiled, and extorted, routinely profiled and interrogated, routinely profiled. And in some cases, in the extreme group, there's a group called SARS, which is the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, right? At a point, many years ago, there was a huge amount of robbery going on in Lagos. There still is, but not in the main areas, in the quote-unquote wealthier areas, right? But the way they were able to quell this robbery was to set up a special anti-robbery squad, that their job is really just to combat robbery. And as a result, they have better weapons, they have more vehicles, and they've been given more powers than the regular police, right? So they are able to determine that this guy is a robber and shoot you, and they say they're doing their job because they were able to give an explanation that we're the Special Anti-Robbery Squad. We saw that this guy was a robber. And so as a result, with that level of power comes a greater level of extortion, greater level of profiling, greater level of all these things. And over time, they've misused this power. They've used it to extort people. They've used it to extort families. They've killed people. And they haven't faced any consequences for it. So people have just been tired. And there have been cases this year, especially in a year with the pandemic, where these things have have come up again.
Resurfaced.
Resurfaced,
yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, they resurfaced, they've come up again, and people are tired, people are frustrated. And there was a particular case not too long ago that triggered everybody and triggered everything. So this led to people protesting against SARS, right? And it started to grow. And in the midst of protesting against SARS, their response was equally heavy-handed. So they came to disperse people in protest. They arrested a few people they felt were protesting. The police basically kicked back at this protest rather than engaging, rather than trying to change the narrative, rather than trying to take on board the criticisms. They came in with more force, and this has led to, a lot more outcry, has led to a lot of people, coming together to rally around this particular thing. And so from there, it escalated to the state level, escalated to the national level. I think it's important to say so this ENDSARS movement has been growing, has been building, and has also been thriving on social media, and there are a few groups of, there's a group called the Feminist Coalition. There's another group of artists and musicians. There's other, activists that have also come together and championed, this growth of this movement by spreading the information out even more. And it became a real problem for the government, So that brings us to where things are at right now, So the government, the thing was spreading. I think, in my opinion, and again, this is just my opinion, so, I feel like a lot of people have then seen that, okay, these guys have been able to mobilize and, get the attention of the government. The president and the Inspector General of Police said they're going to put some changes in place, but people have a big distrust of the government, so then don't really believe, these changes, and the government have asked to negotiate with the protesters, but because there's no leaders of this protest, it's a very decentralized protest, they haven't been able to identify who to negotiate with. So you have a situation where the government has just been baffled, because normally in the past, where you have a protest and you have a leader, those people have been compromised previously. You just go and move the government, you get paid a certain amount, and you call everything off. So this time, people are like, we have no leader, we're not negotiating, we need these things to be done. So there's this standoff between the government. They've said they're going to do a few things, people didn't believe them, didn't believe that the things were far-reaching enough, But I feel the underlying thing, though, beyond ENDSARS, is that there is a frustration by the Nigerian people about governance in general. Right. So I think what happened was ENDSARS, yes, that was the cross we carried, but then I think beyond that, it led to more questions being asked about the Nigerian government, full stop, and I think a bunch of other people who also have similar gripes with the Nigerian government were then able to add fuel to the fire as well. So, so when things kicked off, there are many different groups of people now frustrated at the violence that, has happened, which I'll get into next. But, I think that's the general, so just to give a general understanding, that's where, a lot of it has started. In the midst of that, I think what has happened is that there's been a real groundswell of, for the first time, really, there's been protests all through my life that I've seen. In this situation, I think with the level of organization some of the bodies involved in the protests have, the level of transparency they have, with the level of effectiveness of how they've used social media, has led to a real movement being, born out of it, which, I guess got to the attention of the government, and then eventually they reacted in the way they know how.
So, I know that there was some footage that surfaced online about some of the dead bodies, some of the Nigerians, people that were protesting and so forth. I know that the government was saying it's all fake news. What's your thoughts on that?
So I can only go based on the things I've seen, right? So the things I've seen were that, a couple of days back, there was a curfew announced in Lagos, right? And the government said, there was a curfew announced on the morning of the day the curfew was meant to be implemented. So it initially, around 11 a.m., the government announced that there's a 4 p.m. curfew, which didn't make sense because of a city of so many million people. Yeah. How do you expect everybody to get off work, get home, in time for this curfew? So they extended the curfew till 9. And at about 8 o'clock, there were reports that soldiers had come into the protest ground. There were some protesters who, most of the feminist coalition, most of the entertainers, all of them, sent a message, there's a curfew, guys, let's go home, we'll regroup once the curfew is over, but please get to the safety of your own homes, right? But then obviously, there's another group of people who, and rightfully so, if you think about it in the context of civil disobedience, think if we're here protesting against this very government, and then the government say there's a curfew and go home. Are we just going to say, okay, that's it, we're going home, bye? So they actually thought, no, we're going to stay here. We're peaceful protesters. We have every right to be here and to protest. So they sat down and basically stood their ground, for lack of a better word, And so the military showed up at the protest, and these guys decided to sit and wave Nigerian flags, sing the national anthem, to show that they're not being intimidated by the military, of which the military opened fire. Now, from the videos I've seen, I haven't seen any, I've seen videos of the military shooting. From the videos I've seen, they shot, they look like, from what I've seen, and I can only go really honestly based on what I've seen, they opened fire at the crowd. Whether they were shooting up, whether they were shooting directly at the crowd, from the vantage point of the video I've seen, I can't fully comment on that. But what I do know is that not too long after, there were Instagram live videos from the protesters showing people with bullet holes in them, people suffering from the effects of bullets being shot at them. And knowing the history of the Nigerian military, when they are deployed, they are not deployed to come and talk.
Mm-hmm.
Their deployment is to come and wreck things. Let me put it that way. To come and wreck things. So for me, from what I've seen, both in terms of the guns that were shot towards the protesters and the bullets now in the protesters, and people struggling for their lives, for survival, I can very strongly say that the Nigerian military opened fire on the protesters. So that's number one. The number two is that they then came out and said later that day that this was fake news.
Yes.
Right? I would not expect them to say, yes, we opened fire on the Nigerian people, but one thing I will say, right, in the midst of all of this, I mean, we watched people's IG lives from the protest, and we saw things that were happening. We saw people bleeding out. We saw people with bullets. We saw actually somebody trying to remove a live bullet with a pair of, I don't even know what those were, from a human being's leg. We saw different people that had been shot in different places. We saw the shells, The next day, what then happened, and everybody was enraged, first of all, and rightfully so. Emotions were high, tensions were high. People were shocked that, our government would send, the army, because who else has control of the army, to come out and escalate the situation that way. For me, in looking at how protesters are dealt with everywhere else in the world, there are other ways you can go about the situation, from rubber bullets to
tear gas,
to pepper spray to water cannons. There are many different ways you can disperse a crowd without resorting to live ammunition. So that to me was already, and then, ambulances were trying to come through, but the military had cordoned off the area. So even ambulances coming in to treat the people that were shot or were attacked or were injured were not allowed to come through. So there are many things that occurred that day in that escalation that were very unnecessary and, were uncalled for, quite frankly, by the Nigerian government. Now, the next day, everybody's enraged. I've even been tweeting a bunch of different stories, tweeting things of different people that died. But what we found, now 2 days later, having time to have a bit of a clear head and observe everything, clearer, is that there are a lot of people who are spreading misinformation as well.
Yes.
For whatever reason, I don't know, maybe they're just angry and they want to see the government pay. Maybe they have a hidden agenda. Who knows? But there's a lot of images. There's even an image I posted of a guy carrying a woman in the Nigerian flag, and that picture has turned out to be from a play a couple of years ago.
Wow.
There's a number of people who they said were dead from protests, and it later turned out they died from a motorcycle accident. So and then there's just bits of misinformation that's also been thrown into the mix.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what you have is already state-sanctioned violence against people, injured and dead people, from the protest. We don't know. I don't really know. There's no clarity as to how many people actually died. But there were definitely, from all eye reports that were there were definitely deaths. Some say 7, some say it's as high as 40. Nobody is clear as to how many died. Some people say the soldiers carried the bodies away. We don't know, but we know that there were definitely deaths and there was definitely state-sanctioned violence against Nigerian people. And as a result, now with tensions running high, there's definitely people who are trying to inflame the tensions more. So they're spreading all sorts of misinformation. And, at that point, you're just angry, you're frustrated because it feels like the same old story. So you're sharing things, without necessarily verifying. But, in the past 24 hours, we've tried to make a concerted effort to each other to say, hey, guys, let's try and verify what we share. Because if the more false information we share, the weaker it makes our position.
Yes.
The more the government can come out and disprove, all the things we're saying based on one or two things that were wrong.
Right. That's right.
So there's that information war going on as well on the flip side, And then what has then happened since then is that there's a lot of chaos and pandemonium going on in different parts of Nigeria now where the youths have taken to the streets. But again, I have to stress that the youth that have taken to the streets are not the same youth that you mainly saw at this peaceful protest.
Right.
Because most of the youth you saw at this peaceful protest were, from a certain background, certain demographic, where, I would say were more,
middle class, maybe?
Yeah. Say that again?
More like middle class?
Yes, I would say more middle to upper class. There's a lot of artists as well who showed solidarity with the movement. But these are not the same people that are on the streets now, angry and enraged and, right. Burning things and looting or whatever. I feel that, for a long time, the Nigerian government has weaponized poverty, and I think what has happened now is that the people that are on road, as you would say, are hungry, and they finally seen that, oh, snap, so these governments are coming to attack us like this. Okay, let's show you that we too, we're not going to back down. So they've gone, and then beyond that, there's different layers of politics at play as well, of people trying to make plays for power and things like that in the midst of all of this. So all in all, it's just a volatile situation at the moment.
All right. If you had an opportunity to sit down with the government, what would you say?
If I had an opportunity to sit down with the government, what would I say? I would say that, I think the level of government where you choose, for me, the biggest thing that the government, beyond even these archaic systems that have been in place for a very long time, the biggest mistake they have made, or the biggest flaw, they have many flaws, but I think the biggest flaw that they have is in communicating. I feel like, today the president has come out to speak, and his communication was still not what you would expect. His communication was not, these soldiers went, unfortunately, some civilian lives were lost, I commiserate to their family. No, his communication was seemed more like threats, to be honest. He listed a few things he's done for the poor in a long time, in the time he's been there. And, he listed so many things and said, but you people should not take my kindness for my silence for weakness, and so you've further come to almost like antagonize a already volatile situation. I know that, again, we have to look at these things in context. Our president is a former military leader.
Right.
So the language he knows best is the language of the military. So basically, in essence, they're going to come and shut things down, by force, and then again, like I said, there's a lot of politics in play as well. So for me, I think the biggest thing the government need to identify is that it is not a hindrance or an irritation or a bother for you to speak to your people. Because in essence, you're there to serve the people, not rule the people. And I think a lot of African governments still have the perception of ruling the people, as opposed to serving the people. I mean, generally, governments in a capitalist sort of system, they rule anyway, but at least some of them give you the perception of, the perception that you have, some choice in the matter. The British public can still cry out at a minister breaking COVID laws or whatever, and in some cases heads may roll because there's that semblance of, but I think in a lot of African countries, they look at the same people they had to galvanize to vote them in. They look at them as almost like a hindrance or a bother, and I think that approach really needs to shift to even get to the point where people are able to see what, to see, like they could have escalated that situation so many ways by just communication.
Yeah.
It didn't need to lead to this. It didn't need to go this far. But I feel there's an arrogance in a lot of ways that makes them feel we don't have to, like something like, how dare you talk to me? You don't have the right to talk to me. I am your ruler. And I think that's the first thing I think needs that communication channel. All the rest of ideas and things, yes, but we can't even share those ideas if you're not communicating with us and you're not willing to communicate with us, from a different approach. And I think that's the first message. There are many messages I will share with you. I will tell the Nigerian government, but I think that's the first message, because without communication, there can be a transference of knowledge or transference of perspective. This is our perspective. Let's help you understand our perspective. And you have to communicate that you're willing to understand our perspective as well. And I think that's where the problem has been. For years, the Nigerian government has been in a position where, for many years, and again, another thing that I feel, it is not just this Nigerian government. It is every Nigerian government I've faced throughout my lifetime. They've been like this. This is the way government is run in our country. Right. Aside from all the ways they've botched up ruling us, apart from the money they've misallocated and in some cases stolen, on top of that, there's an arrogance in the way they speak to the people. They still address us as children, children at a protest. I'm going to be 38, just that I have a child myself, just that I'm not a child, and a lot of these people got into power for the first time when they were in their 20s. So the fact that they then look at nearly 40-year-old people as children, is also an anomaly, but it just shows you the way they rate us. Yeah. That's the truth, right? That's just the way they rate us,
My final question is, what can we do to help from here?
I think from here, which leads to the other question you said about the international coverage or whatever, I think that, one of the things I've realized, and it's something that, I strongly believe in, a lot of Africa's problems are not self-inflicted. So let me rephrase that. There's a lot of African problems that are self-inflicted, but the main wound that we're dealing with is still the after effects of colonization, right? So for me, I've seen the way foreign intervention has, although, like I always say, I've seen the way foreign intervention has played a part to destabilize the continent further, right? And in some cases, foreign intervention was not even intervention, it was deployed by foreign governments to go into places like Libya and all of that. So I've seen those things in place. So what I don't want is for foreign powers to feel they want to step in, because, hey, guess what? They don't have the interest of the everyday man at hand either. So that is, so I don't see any, if the first question is what I want, I don't want that. That's the main thing. I think that what the Nigerian government has seen that they've reacted to a lot of times is being embarrassed on a global level, and I feel like that embarrassment and that attention that has been shone on their activities has led them to react. They're fumbling now. They're denying everything, fake news or whatever. But it's because the only reason they're even responding is because the world has seen through social media, right? So we need to ensure that, one, these liberties that we even have in place, although they are limited, like social media and stuff, they don't clamp down on that. And first of all, I think we need the world to also be in position to shout when things are wrong. So we went out to protest in London the other day, and the energy there was high because people were upset and people had seen what had happened. And I realized that as an African community, I'm not even just going to say Nigerian community, as an African community, the reach we have, like, globally is massive.
Yeah.
And the noise we can create globally is massive. And I think that, like, the more we continue to make this noise, then, like, other people around the world see it and then they amplify this noise. I don't know. I think the noise, first of all, is enough to get people to act. And now that they've decided to act, I think there's still going to be a lot of missteps in their actions. And we equally have to call out these missteps as well and put that international pressure on them, to stop their actions. I think the international media, will not react unless our voices are louder and more united, and then they will start to, okay, let's start putting these stories up. But, and I think we need to start calling out these people for what they are. For me, that's why I said in everything I've said, I said it's a state-sanctioned killing of Nigerians. There's no way, there's no minced words about it. The military that were there are not the military from Ghana. They are the Nigerian military.
Yeah.
And who controls the Nigerian military is the Nigerian state. So this is what it is, and we need to call these things for what they are. I think that the leaders around the world need to strongly condemn. I don't say they should intervene, but they should strongly condemn, what is happening. You can't be going half and half. You can't say, oh, we've spoken to, no, like, condemn. We condemn in unequivocal terms what is happening to the Nigerian people. That's what I think we need to do. Continue to make as much noise and amplify it until the people where we are equally see it as a serious matter.
Exactly. I agree.
Yeah.
Man, thank you so much, man, for this insight. Thank you
no
so much
worries,
for your time. Thank you so much for just sharing some great knowledge. And I'm pretty sure that those that are listening will definitely have a more of a deep understanding about what is actually going on right now.
Yeah, man. I think that, one of the main things we've seen in the last few days is that there's a lot of violence happening on the street, and we don't want that. We don't want destruction, because guess what? At the end of all that destruction is the man that lives. The average man that will suffer, average woman that will suffer. Shops are being burned, properties are being looted, all those things. Those things don't ever get to the people in power, because their things are not among. Like, they are sitting in their villas and they're not affected by this thing. So we can't keep harming ourselves and making this thing a tribal thing or making it, something else. We need more unity than anything at this moment.
Absolutely.
And so for me, this platform, the opportunity to talk is just, for me, is more of an opportunity to call for unity. We need to be united, and we need to know how we strategically move forward as a country, as a people, and even as Black people in general. But thank you for the platform. Thank you for the opportunity to speak as well.
Thank you so much, man. You're now one of the bros now, man. So, you know what I mean? I'm always call upon you if need be, man. We like your
a lot of
your
problems that are caused in Nigeria and in Africa at the moment are the sole root of them is because of Western and European interference, and that interference is due to our natural resources. The natural resources in Africa are not found anywhere else in the world. We've got such a vast amount that's not found anywhere else in the world. And a lot of European Western, and now we're seeing Chinese companies know this. And the easiest way to, manipulate or the easiest way to kind of obtain these resources at the cheapest price possible is to, either cause conflict or either, corruption, where, leaders within or people or with positions of power within these African countries, if you pay them a certain amount or if you give them, a cut of something, then they're going to kind of turn a blind eye to that deal or that bit of land that you need to buy to disrupt things. So I think it kind of starts there. And what we're seeing now in terms of like police brutality and how the Nigerian forces are acting and how the politicians are reacting to the protest is because they've got that same sort of mind frame where it's just like, you're not going to disrupt what is happening. You're not going to disrupt my sort of, my income or my well-being from these Western people. So I'm just going to react with full force because really and truly we don't care about you. And look, I don't live in Nigeria, but the news I see all the time and the way people talk to me about Nigeria and how it's been handled by our so-called leaders, it's all the same thing. And I'm sure, like, I'm not too clued up on other countries, but I'm sure there's a lot of countries who are facing that sort of similar sort of mismanagement or misrun country due to leaders being too focused on, wealth or whatever. I saw something today that said, Nigerian leaders are some of the best paid in the world, while at the same time, the poverty is what in Nigeria is probably some of the worst in the world. So that kind of just shows you where things are with Nigeria. And me as a Nigerian, it is very, very sad to see. But at the same time, I will not be blind to the fact that imperialism has had an effect on this. Like I'm not 100% clued up on it, but look, man, I just look at logic and I look at facts, and from what I've been seeing, this is the reason that some of this shit is kicking off right now, to be honest.
But how do you think it got to this level of extremism?
Yeah, like it is a very, 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 very difficult sort of answer. I guess in Africa, the way things are done in terms of I don't know, of like that authoritative sort of approach to handling situations to do with people living in the country, like it's always been harsh. It's always been very, very harsh and very, very violent. And Africa's history is littered with situations and incidents that have happened that have been very, 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 very violent. And look, I'm not going to just single out Africa as a continent as the only people that have gone through this. Like all over the world, every country, there is that sort of, violent sort of reaction to things. But I feel like with Nigeria, look, there's so many stories of people being paid a certain amount and then they go to a protest and they start beating up protesters and this, that and the other. It's like people are so poor and so needy and so desperate. If a government official says to you, look, take this 500 naira or 1,000 naira to go and go and do this for me. Someone who's been struggling or is making, I don't know, less than that in a month, they're gonna turn around and say, okay, yeah, I'll go and do it because the struggle is so real. Like they're not gonna care about, oh, look, this is against my morals or whatever. That money can do whatever for them. So the reason why the violence is so high is because people are so desperate and people are in a position where their backs against the wall.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't know, I saw another stat that, the chief of police of Nigeria is on under 20 grand a year, and if you compare that to somewhere like here, the chief of police is probably one of the highest earners in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then if you compare like the chief of police in Nigeria to a politician who's bringing in maybe $2 million a year in dollars, then that shows you where the problem is. It's like you've got the few elites who are the politicians, and then you've got a mass of people underneath that who are struggling. So those politicians are really able to just control things like with that wealth.
Mm.
And if the politicians say, look, go in there, do this or whatever to shut these people up or whatever, then the people beneath them are going to do it. But, obviously the loss of life is never a good thing, but I really, really commend people, and I really commend people who are protesting and stuff like this. And they're saying, you know what, you can do whatever you want, but we're not going to shut up. We're not going to stop this. I'm going to keep on going. And I really, really commend people who are kind of taking that sort of approach.
Right. What's your stance on the media's outtake? Considering this has been going for quite a while now, maybe approximately, I mean, it's probably going for a very long time, but it's highlighted now, maybe so the last 2 weeks or so.
Yeah.
Why do you think the media hasn't really publicized it or spoken until maybe like now? Because
look, these things have been going on in Nigeria for years. Like it's no, like I've been like a witness to that. When I've been to Niger, I've seen these things happen. I've heard stories. I've heard this, that, and the other. It's been going on for years. But fortunately, today we live in a world of social media, and social media has, brought a lot of these issues to the forefront. Even there's a report from a politician in Nigeria saying that no one died in Lekki, where they or whatever. No one died, no one got shot or whatever. But you look at social media and people were there, and then you can see the bodies laid out on the ground. So social media is able to debunk the lies that are being pushed by politicians when 20, 30 years ago, we believed that straight away. So with like the media picking up what's going on now, like I said, the media in the country we live in is controlled by the West. Mm. Like it's controlled by the West, and the West has interest in Nigeria because of those said resources. So if Nigeria is coming to a place now where with all of these protests and all of this stuff that's happening, where people are saying, you know what, we've had enough. We're not standing for this now. Like this is kind of like a catalyst for change. Yeah, it starts with the ENDSARS movement, but then it says, what if it moves its way up to, you know what, let's sort our governments out. Okay, we sorted the governments out. All right, let's sort out the contracts that Shell, that all of these different big corporations have in Nigeria. What if the people start changing their minds? Mm-hmm. Then what happens? Big companies that are in the Western world start getting hurt because Nigeria comes together and says, you know what, let's make these deals work for us as a country, rather than, say for example, $100 million deal, 2 million, 3 million goes to a politician who controls that sort of area, and then the 98 million goes out of the country to whatever corporation.
Yeah.
What if the people say, you know what, no, we're not having that. You can take your little 10, 20 million corporation, but this 80 million that's left, that's going into Nigeria to help us build our own resources and stuff like that. What if the people start thinking like that? And that's the reason why I feel like the Western media has been so slow to take this stuff up, because they don't want it to be a news story. They don't want it to be a news story, because then more people start taking notice of it, and it starts to gain traction, and it starts to become a thing, and more people start feeling, you know what, this is a real thing, let me make a change. Today, people went out in London to protest about this. I think Burna Boy was out there as well. Like, once something starts, like, it's little catalysts like this. Look at all what George Floyd did. As soon as that guy died, it rolled on and rolled on and rolled on, and we're still having that conversation today.
Yeah.
So with this now, yeah, because it started in social media, like the media companies and media organizations, they can't stop it. It's here now. It's whatever. So, like, that's why I feel like they've been really, really slow on it. They've been slow on it because it's not in their interest for people to take notice of what is happening in Nigeria, to be honest.
I'm going in regardless, but it still pains me as well of what's going on, and I still feel very upset about what's going on as well. And this is a time when I feel like we do need unity, and we do need to kind of stamp out some of this corrupt leadership in power. And I don't know why we feel like we give into the stereotypes of the continent of Africa having corrupt leaders. Although there's corrupt leaders everywhere, but it just seems like the corruption is very much documented and highlighted amongst everyone else.
Exactly. And to be honest with you, there's a reason for that, because that's how, I hate to say it, but that's how the oppressor wants us to feel. That's how the narrative is driven for, in the Western world, for, let me just say, black people in general. We're always seen as the worst type of anything.
Yeah.
And those stereotypes and whatever are used to keep us
suppressed.
Oppressed, basically.
Yeah.
In this country, in United Kingdom, in America, the corruption is more than those countries. Like, I'm telling you, it's more.
But over here we just dress up really well and just polish it. Basically, we just polish it.
They just polish it. Look at, for example, our government. They've handed out, what was it, nearly 12 billion, I think it is, in contracts to do with track and trace or whatever.
Yeah.
Or with this whole COVID thing or whatever. Or I think it was PPE contracts and private firms and this and the other. If you follow the money as to who owns these companies, they're basically friends of friends of the government, friends of a brother of this guy who's in the government, a sister of that guy, a husband of that person. They're basically committing fraud in front of our eyes. But you and me, we're compassionate people. We care about like certain things, and it's not just with Africa. With if there's something crazy happening in let's say Brazil, like people are getting killed out there, you're compassionate. You're gonna say, you know what, that's crazy. Let's try and let me do my little bit to help that out. But what I've realized is in this country, there's a lot of people who don't care. They don't like with that corruption stuff. some people don't care. Like, it's not affecting me. I don't really care. Whatever. Because if they did, that would be, people would be outside number 10 right now, and they'd be talking about that, and they'd be putting pressure on that. But I just feel like there's a majority of these countries that just they don't care about them situations. They don't care. Like, it's not their problem. Like, as long as you know they're doing their day to day and their thing, it's whatever. And you know, like, I feel like that's the reason why this government, you know, gets away with a lot of what it gets away with. Like, it's I know obviously I'm going off on a bit of a tangent or whatever, but I feel that's the reason why. And it's very, very sad. It's very, very sad. But you know, this is the country I'm living in.
A lot of us are running around screaming that all Black Lives Matter. What's your take on the movement and how that same consistency which we had for, say, America and to, say, Nigeria? Like, have you noticed how when there was police brutality in America, a lot of us went all out, pushing that narrative and fighting that fight and raising awareness. But now that it's happening in Nigeria, I don't feel like the same energy is being had. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's down to different things. I think the connotation, I don't know, the attachment we have with Black Lives Matter is kind of focuses a lot on Black people in the Western world, especially America and the UK. And I think when you see injustice being done to Black people in Africa, I think there's a norm to it. You know, people are numb to it as well. So it's like, okay, that's going on in Nigeria. A lot of things are going on in the African world. Why should Nigeria sort of stand out, or why should we sort of care? Because they're always, Africa's not, you know, Africa is this, Africa is that anyway. So, you know, corruption is happening anyway. So I think for me, that's how I think. That's why I think that's what kind of, that's one of the reasons that I think people don't consider Black African, they don't associate the problems and the injustice that goes on with Black Africans with Black Lives Matter. I think there's a what's the word? There's a separation that people subconsciously sort of made, and I think it's not necessarily their fault, but I think it's because what Black Lives Matter was founded upon was injustice in America, the shooting, the police brutality. I think people haven't made that. A lot of people haven't made a connection that actually, you know, this is about Black people as a whole. You know, Black people in China or in India or in Africa, or it's about Black people being looked at as second citizens or being looked at as nothing, or, you know. So I think until we get to that point, I think Black Lives Matter would always be seen as something that happens, something that only pertains to Black people in the Western culture and in the Western world, especially America.
So what's your outtake on the ENDSARS as well? What's your thoughts on it? How does it make you feel?
I think I feel very helpless. I think especially, it's been a very emotional period for me, especially because I was born in Nigeria and, you know, my parents migrated here. So I was lucky to leave when I was 11. And I say lucky because I witnessed, you know, a lot of things in Nigeria, things that when I moved over here, I realized the luxury and the opportunity. I realized the luxury that people experience here, you know. And the ENDSARS movement for me, it's like, you know, it's unbelievable watching what your life could be like, you know. And I think, fortunately for me, my parents in Nigeria could have, you know, made my life a lot better for me. in many ways, but it's still the thought of, even if I wasn't in that situation, I know my neighbor or my friend would be doing exactly that. And that's a very emotional thing to digest, because I'm here, you know, my life isn't perfect, but it is in a better position than the people that I've left behind. And knowing that I can't get involved in as much, because I can sympathize with them, but I'm not there to help. I'm not there to sort of be a part of that movement. So in some ways I feel helpless. But then on the other end of the stick is I am happy for this revolution. I think this is definitely a spiritual and physical shift for everybody. And I think, you know, Nigerians have set the tone for, and I think every other African country is looking and thinking, okay, well, if Nigerians do this, we surely can sort of emulate what they're doing in a different way. So I think there's both positives and negatives, but, you know, I'm very emotionally connected to it, because again, like, being someone who I could have been in that situation, I don't even have been protesting, but the fact that I know my families that I've left at home back in Nigeria, how they're feeling and all of that, it's kind of sad to just watch and not really be of help, if you get what I mean.
And what do you think needs to change in order to make Nigeria better?
I think the biggest problem with Nigeria is the division amongst Nigerians. The government, of course, I think that one is pretty obvious. And I think Nigerians need to look at each other and actually love each other. And I know, you know, there's so many different ways we can come up with how we can action things. I think because this is a deep-rooted issue, it starts with individuals in Nigeria. It's looking at each other and actually loving each other as thyself, and looking at each other and saying, you know what, I want better for you as my brother, or I want better for you as my sister. So therefore, I'm going to operate from a place of love, from a place of selflessness. Because I think Nigeria, there's a lot of selfishness going on, a lot of greed, that it's literally every man for themselves. And I think until that narrative and that cloud of negativity is taken away from everyone. I mean, I saw on the news 2 days ago, you know, food that was kept for COVID, you know, was kept away from people. And I think hoarding, and I think that's very, it just literally just spells out exactly what people are doing there. They're very selfish, and I understand why, because when you live in a place where there's a lot of lack, you know, everybody has to be for themselves. Whereas here, there's a lot of, even though our opportunities are, you know, limited to an extent, but the opportunity is still there. People are all, you know, you don't get to go to uni here and not find a job for 10 years. That's almost impossible in this country. Whereas in Nigeria, people are jobless. You know, people have read medicine, or, you know, there's no job, or even when there are jobs, they're severely underpaid. So I think I understand, but at the same time, the only way, the simplest way to progress is loving each other. And I think if everybody, including the government, operate from a place of love, there's a shift. It changes, because where you're operating from then becomes a physical manifestation. You know, it rarely does it work the other way around. Everything sort of starts from the inside, and then from then it pulls out. And so I think that's the simplest explanation. But obviously there are ways that, you know, we can help the government, you know, schools, education. All these things are kind of like common sense to build any society. But I think because of the issue that Nigeria has, which is very heavy, is loving each other. You know, I mean, I'm Yoruba, and the conflict between Yorubas and Igbos and Hausa, it's unbelievable for people from the same country. And that needs to be somehow eliminated. And if we don't have that solidarity and that, you know, it won't work, because everybody is blind, basically.
So there you have it. Hope you were well educated. Hope you found it interesting. Hope you learned something new. And I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for listening. And this has been No Shoes in the House podcast.